January 15th, 1908 was a red-letter day in the history of Littleton and Arapahoe County. For then was completed a landmark and a monument to the prosperity and the progress of our people. Skilled and faithful service had been rendered, and now the result was seen in a palace of beauty, a temple of justice, and a fortress of law.
With those words, the January 17, 1908 edition of the Littleton Independent heralded the dedication of the newly constructed Arapahoe County Courthouse. This is the story of a building that in 1907 came to be known as the Temple of Justice, of how the area was settled, and of Littleton's victorious bid to become the county seat. How construction of the towering stone edifice signaled Littleton's coming of age, of the trials and tribulations that occurred in this building over the past 92 years, and how years of abandonment and neglect left the building primed for the wrecking ball. This is also the story of citizens and politicians and a collective community vision that affirmed the city's commitment to historic preservation to the tune of $3.5 million. The first documented glimpse of the Littleton area was made in 1820 by Major Stephen Long, who led an exploring expedition to document the plant and animal life and geological formations. Only fur trappers, traders, Indians, and an infrequent military patrol happened across this area for the next 30 years. The rush of gold fever brought many people to Colorado. Richard Sullivan Little was one of them. In 1861, he became the surveyor and engineer on a proposal to construct a 10-mile ditch that would carry water from the South Platte River. It would later be called the City Ditch. He brought his wife, Angeline, from Chicago to Colorado in 1862. In 1867, Little and others founded a mill which proved to be an instant success. The active mill met steady employment and the need for housing for mill workers. In 1871, the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad steamed through, providing a link to the outside world. In 1872, Mr. Little filed a plat of his land and laid out a town site. It consisted of 18 blocks, with subdivisions ranging from 9 to 20 lots. Churches and schools began to spring up to serve the needs of Littleton's first families. By 1888, calls for town government were led by Littleton Independent editor H.V. Bullock. In March 1890, Littleton citizens voted on the issue. Of 89 votes cast, only 3 opposed incorporation. Elections were held April 1st, and Littleton's first mayor was elected, local real estate salesman F.S. Gilmore. In February 1901, Littleton's representative, Frank R. Calley, presented the state legislature with a bill calling for a new county to be called South Arapahoe. Originally created as a part of Kansas Territory in 1855, the old Arapahoe County became one of 17 counties when the Colorado Territory was formed in 1861. In 1902, the legislature agreed to the reorganization. That December, South Arapahoe County was formed, with the word South soon dropped. Governor Orman named Littleton as the temporary county seat, pending a decision by the electorate. Over the next year and a half, until November 1904, considerable debate raged regarding the location of the county seat. Littleton was challenged by Englewood. Littleton held 2 advantages, however. It was already the acting county seat, and Englewood had a slightly tarnished image. When the election was held to determine the county seat, Littleton won, 1,310 votes to 829. Securing the county seat meant gaining county offices and an economic boost. Soon the county commissioners, assessors, surveyors, sheriff, and judges, along with the lawyers, could be seen frequenting Littleton's Main Street. County offices adjoined those of the town trustees. In July of 1907, a $52,845 contract initiated the construction of the county courthouse building. Its location, on a hillside, offered panoramic views, and Littleton was positioned carefully and politically at the forefront. By January of 1908, county officials were moving into the towering stone edifice, now the pride of Littleton's skyline. Here was a structure meant to signal permanence, from the jail in its basement to its first-floor offices and its second-floor courtrooms and an attic for jury deliberations. Gaining this proud building meant Littleton had come of age. The building was designed by English-trained architect John J. Huddar, called one of Denver's most talented 19th century architects. The building was a significant example of the Mission Revival style with its hipped roof and curvilinear parapets. According to published accounts, more than 1,500 visitors enjoyed the hospitality of local elected officials on that winter day, a fairly remarkable number considering the limitations of transportation early in the century and the fact that Littleton's population was only 738 in 1900. The revelers' gaiety included a reception, dancing, and luncheon. Gold medals were presented to Commissioners Henry Brady, J.W. Long, and C.W. Bowles. The Honorable J.W. Springer, who settled on 10,000 acres on what is now Highlands Ranch, and later ran unsuccessfully for Vice President of the United States, addressed those gathered with great eloquence.
I rejoice with you that your new Temple of Justice stands completed. It is my pleasure to congratulate you on such a superb edifice, and at the same time that you have such a worthy number of faithful public officials. This is one county where the officials are uniformly servants of the people, not their masters. You deserve felicitation upon your choice of men to guide the destiny of your splendid county. They belong to the class of progressive Americans. They figured the cost, affirmed the plans,
and this temple
is the result.
I again congratulate both officials of the city and county that got the full worth of your money. With tonight, you start this temple on its tireless mission of doing equity to rich and poor, high and low alike. What destinies will be decided and recorded here? I venture the hope and the prediction that good will come of it all.
And so it went. The small town grew over the decades. Downtown prospered. Large corporations like the Martin Marietta Company moved to town and sought a highly educated workforce for which good wages were paid. Subdivisions and shopping centers sprang to life, and a well-respected public school system flourished. All the while, justice was administered in the building that remained the focal point of the community. In 1948, construction began on an annex to the west. It cost $327,300 and added another 22,000 square feet to the 21,000 square feet in the original building. The two buildings were connected by a hallway. Numerous remodels took place since that time, one in 1974 where wood paneling was installed in all the courtrooms, and another in 1983 when the air conditioning system was upgraded. Glass block replaced the original windows in the two courtrooms. Rumor has it that a judge ordered the change after someone fired a shot at him through one of the large windows. District Judge Kenneth Stewart began his career on the bench at the Arapahoe County Courthouse in 1981.
I started in the Littleton Courthouse. I was sworn in as a judge in June of 1981. So I was in that courthouse for about 6.5 years, and I sat in two different courtrooms. One of the most unusual incidents happened while I was in the Division 4 courtroom, which was the upstairs courtroom on the southeast end of the building. I had been sitting in that courtroom for several years, every single day, so you get very used to the view as you're sitting on the bench looking out over the courtroom. And one day in the middle of court proceedings, I was just looking at the courtroom, and for some reason I thought the ceiling looked a little different. And I looked at it again maybe the next day, and I was convinced at that point there was something different about the ceiling. So I asked the county to send in the building engineers to look at it, and within an hour of them arriving in the building, my courtroom was condemned and shut down because one of the ceiling beams was beginning to collapse, and the ceiling was in fact bowed a little bit downward.
Brian Vogt is president of the South Metro Denver Chamber of Commerce and an Arapahoe County native. His well-known family settled on Ridge Road in 1962.
Both my parents were elected officials. My mother was county treasurer and actually started working at the treasurer's office in the mid-'70s in the old courthouse. And I used to visit her. She was about on the third floor, I think it was, way up, and see all the kind of smelly green paint on the upstairs parts, that bluish green color, turquoise, just jammed full of stuff before the so-called Glass Palace was built at Prince and Santa Fe. But the history goes much farther back. My father was elected sheriff in 1962. He was 32 years old at the time. I think my sister must have been 7 or 8, and I was 4. And we were living in Aurora. Dad had been an investigator with the sheriff's department, very, very small sheriff's department. And we moved out to Littleton up until 1962 or 63 when he actually took office. All sheriffs actually lived in the courthouse. And if you look at the pictures in the current county building of all past sheriffs, it's kind of a rogues gallery. It's kind of hard to tell who would have been the criminal and who would have been the sheriff, kind of wild, wild west looking people. And so it's pretty easy to see them living in the courthouse itself, watching over the jail. It was kind of a Mayberry RFD kind of situation, just a couple of cells. The sheriff lived there, a couple deputies, horseback, a lot of them on horseback. And of course, we moved out there, and with little kids, my mother looked at that courthouse, the jail, the people who were in the jail, and said, "Not on your life." And we were the first sheriff's family not to live in the courthouse. There are still sheriffs around the state who live as part of the jail. In fact, in Jefferson County, until just a few years ago, they lived on the grounds of the jail, which is kind of inconceivable. So I guess I came within a hair's breadth of becoming Opie.
Longtime Arapahoe County Sheriff Pat Sullivan graduated from Littleton High School in 1962, began working as a dispatcher, and later as an officer for the Littleton Police Department.
When we were using it heavily towards the end there, the floors were creaking. The building had a lot of voices, a lot of creakiness to the building itself. As probably Judge Stewart put out to you or explained to you, the beams breaking and cracking. You could hear that. You could hear that old building talking to you. And so we'll be looking for some of that, antiqueness of the old courthouse. The old vault door where Margie Page maintained her records for the clerk and recorder's office, that big black vault door down there in that lower level. A lot of those things, we'll look to see if they've been able to retain those and keep them there as part of that history of the courthouse.
Dick Valor's family came to Colorado in 1903 and bought a hardware store in 1917. Main Street's Valor Hardware still thrives 83 years later.
My fondest memory of the courthouse is it had the greatest lawn to go nightcrawler hunting on in the whole city of Littleton. And I made spending, this is off the subject a little bit, but I made my spending money for 2 or 3 years in the summer going down and catching night crawlers off the courthouse lawn. That was the big game. I loved that old courthouse. It was like the heart of, well, it was the heart of the city, but it was really kind of the heart of the county because, you know, everything rotated around the county seat. And some of the changes that were made in later years, I didn't care for. As I can remember back, it seemed to me they actually ran some Christmas lights on the dome, and it was pretty. You know, it kind of, he said, well, you know, here I am, a little kid growing up, but I'm saying, why didn't they do the dome in gold like they did the Capitol? My dad said, the county can't afford that. You know, that was, you know, tight dollars. The sheriff's office was there, and my recollection is of Chick Foster mainly, and he and his wife lived right next to the jail. And you know, you didn't think anything of going up and delivering Chick and his wife the Littleton Independent, because that's what I did kind of when I was a young kid. I liked the old trees that were around it, the old maple trees. It was just kind of the heart of the city, and a lot of the pictures of the old pictures that you see were all taken off the steps of the courthouse, looking down Main Street, looking, you know, because we weren't a very big town then.
Longtime resident Betty Heaton, wife of former mayor and city council member Tom Heaton, recalled a simpler time in the late 1950s.
When we moved here 40 years ago, downtown was just a tiny little place, and we had come from an urban area with a lot of buildings and, you know, a city type thing. And I walked downtown with my kids, who at that time were about 6 and 8, and there was a little tiny grocery store down there that sold everything you could think of. It wasn't very big, but it sold everything. And I was amazed at people coming in on horseback and buying groceries and going home. That was new to me because I had never seen anything like that before. And it was very small. I think it was around maybe 13,000 at that time.
But like all good things, the usefulness of the Arapahoe County Courthouse was coming to an end. The rapidly growing population in eastern Arapahoe County required much larger and more functional space to accommodate the court's needs. When construction was completed in 1987 on the Arapahoe County Justice Center near Arapahoe Road and I-25, the doors of the Arapahoe County Courthouse closed, and many thought for good. For 10 years, the building sat vacant, except for the proliferation of pigeons, squirrels, rodents, and raccoons. The windows were boarded. The roof failed, causing extensive water and weather damage to the interior. Mechanical ventilation and environmental systems were woefully outdated. Decades of needed improvement to health and safety codes had passed the building by. Even from the outside, the crumbling mortar left many to feel that time had run out to save the courthouse. A report by county staff indicated that economically the most feasible solution was demolition. By early 1997, local business owners teamed with Arapahoe County Commissioner John Brackney. The building had become an eyesore, and Brackney was interested in exploring the feasibility of a private party coming forth to redevelop it. The city of Littleton had been anticipating relocation of the municipal court operation to a new location for nearly 10 years. The city had only one small courtroom and cramped office space for 5 clerks and an administrator. Plus, security became a growing concern raised by the uncomfortable mix of court functions and general government operations. But to date, a suitable location had yet to be found. Mayor Pro Tem Pat Cronenberger, who served as mayor during the project's infancy, also represents the district in which the courthouse is located.
Well, many things converged in the summer of 1997 that were very key to making the courthouse a project that looked like it was going to happen. You had the city that was in dire need of additional court space. We've definitely outgrown our current space at City Hall, and we needed to do something else, whether that was another building that we might build or that we might rent space, but we needed additional space for our court facility. You also had one of the county commissioners who had been recently elected, John Brackney, who had grown up in the community and brought what I call new energy about thinking about the restoration of the courthouse. And he was definitely talking it up in the community and really got us all more motivated at that point to think in terms of what could be done with this historic building. And then the county's thinking also evolved to the point where they knew that this was an excess building, they didn't need it in their building stock, and they knew they would have to pay to demolish the building if they were to demolish it. And they were willing to come forward with the funds to demolish the west addition of the building and do all of the asbestos abatement. So I'd say all those things really converged to take the courthouse project from one of just dreams to on the verge of reality.
Local elected officials agreed that resurrection of the Temple of Justice was a priority for the new century. The level of cooperation between the Arapahoe County Commissioners and the Littleton City Council was unheralded.
Well, actually, it would have been easiest just to leave it there for another 10 or 20 or 30 years, and then eventually it would have been a very easy decision to say, hey, look at this eyesore, let's finish tearing it down. And that's what I didn't want. I was actually thrilled, really sincerely thrilled how big the leadership of Littleton came through. It was, when I was first conceptualizing it, I was thinking that it probably wouldn't even be done during my terms of office. I was envisioning rallies and bake sales and charitable contributions, and then somebody with a trust or corporate contributions or a corporation taking it over, Starbucks or a Barnes & Noble historic bookstore, something that would make it work. And I thought that would actually take years. I was extremely pleased that Littleton came through so fast, so hard, and so effectively that it's being done in an extremely limited amount of time. I think if it's lucky that Littleton did that too. I think that window of opportunity for Littleton could change because citizens are always demanding something whether it's a stop sign or a wall, and don't get me wrong, there are important things that we as commissioners and council people do, but it's true that there was no constituency demanding to save the courthouse. And I think it takes some real vision to grasp something and see that it's important not for our terms of office, but 50 years from now, or 100 or 200 years from now. And the courthouse is, I don't want to be too melodramatic, I mean, it wouldn't have been the end of the world if the courthouse would have been torn down. It sure would have hurt, though, and in a lot of different ways. I think philosophically, economically, deeper, almost spiritually.
And so the drive to save the courthouse began. Discussions commenced between the Littleton City Council and staff and the Arapahoe County Commissioners and staff. Complicating the issue was the difficulty in pinning down the cost. After more than 90 years of remodels and deterioration, it was tough to determine what was underneath the layers and calculate how much of the building must be repaired, what had to be replaced, and what must be restored. On September 1st, 1998, historic landmark status was approved by the city.
Designating the courthouse was never a problem. It was a building that those of us on the board, and I think a lot of people in the community, care very deeply about. It is so significant in terms of this place. It sits there on the side of the hill like the Grand Dame of Main Street, and it looks down the hill, and now I always think in a very benevolent kind of way. When the building was vacated in '87, there was a lot of concern on the part of people in the community about what would happen to that building. And fortunately, the county didn't move too quickly on that and left it vacant so that it could be recycled in a sense. I can't imagine the community without that building. It is such a significant part. I can only imagine how excited the community was when the building was built. There had been a hot and heated election between Littleton and Englewood to see who was going to be the county seat. Arapahoe County had just been created in its present form, and Littleton was so excited when they won the election. So it was really important to them to build the nicest building they possibly could. The building sits there on the side of the hill, and you can see that building from many, many places on the western side of this community, and even over as far as Loretta Heights, you can see the cupola sticking up. And I think it must have been very exciting for everybody to see that happen. I can't imagine the community without the building. So we had absolutely no problem. We could hardly wait for the process to take place.
The Arapahoe County Commissioners deeded the property to the city and provided $341,000 to pay for raising the annex and the asbestos abatement costs. Many citizens, former court employees, and other local dignitaries gathered to celebrate the West Annex demolition on September 18, 1998. The Littleton City Council then approved a package of ordinances on May 4, 1999, which paved the way for the project.
The vote is 7 in favor of the motion. The ordinance carries.
The council transferred ownership of the property to the Littleton Municipal Authority, which permitted the issuance of certificates of participation to finance the $3.5 million cost. After 25 years of making payments on the certificates, the building authority will transfer ownership back to the city. A matching grant from the State Historical Society proved to be the icing on the cake. $324,000 was awarded from the State Historical Fund for exterior restoration. In that grant cycle, it was the second largest of the 112 grants awarded. The grant was limited to restoration of the exterior of the building to its original condition. The work included replacing, sealing, and repairing the exterior masonry, reconstructing the west entry, which was destroyed when the 1948 addition was attached, replacement of the original 90-year-old roof, restoration of the cupola, rehabilitation of the windows, replacement of the exterior doors, and restoration of the cornice. Littleton Historical Museum Director Mary Allman, with 2 major historic restoration projects under her belt in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, took on the difficult task of project manager.
This particular project is actually a combination of restoration and rehabilitation. What we are doing is we are restoring the exterior of the courthouse to meet the Secretary of Interior standards for historic preservation. But on the interior, we need to make it a functional courthouse for the municipal courts, and so as a result of that, basically what we need to do is to meet modern code. We need to make sure that the office space is adequate, and we need to make sure that all the security systems and all of the electrical systems and so forth that are needed for a modern courthouse are in place. So the interior is basically a rehabilitation while we're trying to change some things around, even though we are paying attention and paying very close attention to many of the finishes that are inside the building, making sure that we are working in favor of the restoration project and refinishing as many of the historic surfaces as we possibly can.
Sid Pugalis, from the architecture firm of Andrews and Anderson, served as principal architect on the project.
The old Arapahoe County Courthouse project, like other projects, has some difficulties or extra challenges to investigate and overcome and really to challenge us. And in particular, this building was left, I think, 18 years abandoned. And with that, you have pests that may have infiltrated the building. And in this case, it was bats and pigeons. So this was a serious abatement problem that we had to deal with. So, and that and asbestos and lead abatement, which is pretty typical. It's a large part of the projects. It seems we spend a lot of time doing lead and asbestos abatement.
Is everybody ready?
On May 13th, the former Arapahoe County Courthouse was dedicated and open to the public.
Having grown up in Littleton, it was very gratifying to me to be able to be a part of the decision-making process of how the restoration will take place. And I think that once all of the decisions that we've made are shown in the final product of the building restoration, the whole city will be very happy to see a strong symbol of their past brought back to life.
It seems that not only the city of Littleton, but across Colorado, there seems to be a resurgence for the community, and that basically means that people are now finding a reason or a need to find a community center. So they seem to be restoring old main streets, old governmental or institutional type buildings. There's a significant amount of town halls that are starting to be reclaimed, or buildings that have been abandoned that are being restored. So the city of Littleton seems to be the front runner and the leader in this movement.
Well, that's one of the great things about Littleton. Littleton is one of the few, what many people consider a suburb. It really is a freestanding community that kind of got attached to a larger city. But the great thing about Littleton is that it's historic and it's preserved its history. It actually has a downtown and a main street. Most true suburbs don't. They're built just for residential uses and never really had a commercial center like Littleton did. So that sense of history is something that really gives Littleton an identity. When you talk to people, even that don't live in Littleton but may have a Littleton mailing address, they claim Littleton as their hometown, their community. And a big part of that is its historic traditions. The top of Main Street, looking up Main Street and the way it's evolved and become so vibrant and beautiful again, you look up at the top of that hill and see that courthouse. It's just a connection to our past, and now to see that it's going to have new life again, it gives us a future to look forward to. It brings it all together. It gives us a sense of who we are.
I think there's a lot of people in Highlands Ranch, in South Jeffco particularly, that look to identify with Littleton because of what Littleton has in the way of a downtown area. That courthouse square concept with the bookends of the courthouse and the Carnegie Library. the history behind just the Town Hall Art Center and those 3 or 4 blocks of buildings there. Many people that live many, many miles from downtown identify as being part of Littleton because it gives them something to hang their hat on, some sense of community.
I'm incredibly proud that as a citizen of this city that we've made this investment and that for many years we've been talking about downtown as the heart of the community, and I think this is one major step to really make downtown the heart of the community and keep it alive and well in our city.
It sounds a little melodramatic, some young man, but I'll bet I'll include this as one of my life's greatest accomplishments. I really mean that. It's not that I solved it, because I really didn't. It's Littleton. But I had a small portion in saving something I think to be valuable. And I don't know when that time is that the citizens will appreciate it. I really don't. I don't know if it will be instantaneous when everybody walks in the first time. But I do think that when I'm sitting, hopefully, with my grandchildren on my lap, I can tell them that I had a part in saving that building. And that's the most important thing for me. I will be proud that if you look at the people that have moved back to the Littleton area, we will have one of the highest rates, I think, in the nation of people that move into Littleton and stay. They don't go anywhere. They like it. And if you look at the amount of people that I went to high school, at Littleton High School, that have moved back in near their parents or their grandparents, it's phenomenal. We really live in a neat place. And it's my hope that if we all care about our community in little different ways, Courthouse is one of them, but it's a small part of a large community, that our children will want to keep moving back with us, and our grandchildren may move back with us.
Some would say it was risky, maybe even a gamble to take on the restoration of a 92-year-old building, and they were right. The project presented innumerable challenges, but none greater than those encountered by a generation of Littleton citizens who faced even greater obstacles when they settled here in the middle of the 19th century. They, too, didn't take the easiest path to a better life, but with the hard work and determination, that is what they earned and left for the rest of us to enjoy. Visionaries worked diligently to build the Temple of Justice in 1907, and nearly 100 years later, equally visionary citizens and politicians struggled to preserve it. A shiny new roof, spectacular views from the previously boarded cupola, fresh paint, modern fixtures, restored windows, and other refurbished historic touches have given the aging structure a new life. It's proven to be as dear to the citizens of Littleton today as it was to those who were the first to enter its hallowed halls. True believers committed themselves to the drive to restore it. They reestablished the building as a vital thread in the fabric of the community. The Temple of Justice is primed to serve with distinction for the next generation of Littleton citizens.